That's no problem.
And a morning.
We're all learning. All right, welcome everybody. Congratulations. My name is Judge Lindsay, and I will be presiding over this round. I want to inquire of both sides if you are ready to proceed to trial.
Yes, Your Honor, the prosecution's ready.
Yes, Your Honor, the defense is ready to proceed.
Great. I have a few preliminary matters, and then I'll ask the teams to introduce themselves and their witnesses, and then we'll get everybody sworn in, and then we'll get going. So first, I want to remind the teams that there will be no recesses allowed, with the exception of those that are granted for a health emergency, and especially not between the end of witness examination and the beginning of closing arguments. I'm going to remind the teams and coaches that any disputes arising out of the competition must be reported in accordance with the competition rules. Compliance with time requirements will be considered in scoring individual performances, so make sure you're keeping up with your time. Each side, oh, this is introductions. All right, so I'm going to have the prosecution introduce their team first, please.
Good morning, Your Honor. My name is Amanda Brockler, and along with my co-counsel today, we represent the people in this case. Today, I will be performing the direct examination of Detective Markowitz, as well as the cross of Professor Van Owen and the closing arguments.
Thank you.
Good morning, Your Honor. My name is Grant DeRose, and today I'll be doing the direct examination of Alex Fuentes and the cross-examination of Taylor Perkins.
Thank you.
Good morning, Your Honor.
Morning.
My name is Jacob Aragon. Today I'll be giving the opening statement, as well as the direct examination of Kyle Kuzak and the cross-examination of Avery Becker.
Thank you.
Your Honor, at this time, permission for the witnesses to introduce themselves.
Granted.
Good morning, Your Honor. My name is Alicia Pravasi, and I am Jordan Markowitz.
Good morning, Your Honor. My name is Amia Sharma, and I am Alex Fuentes.
Good morning, Your Honor. My name is Sarah Smith, and I am Kyle Kuzak.
Thank you all. And if we could have the defense introduce their team.
Good morning, Your Honor, counsel, members of the jury. My name is Max Seitel, and today I will be presenting the cross-examination of Kyle Kuzak, the direct examination of Blake Van Owen, and the opening statement.
Thank you.
Good morning, Your Honor. My name is Hayden Clausen, and I will be conducting the cross-examination of Alex Fuentes and the direct examination of Taylor Perkins.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Your Honor. I will be presenting the cross-examination of Detective Jordan Markowitz and the direct examination of Avery Becker. I will also be presenting the closing argument. May our witnesses now introduce themselves?
Yes, please.
Good morning, Your Honor. My name is Paige Funchy, and I am Professor Blake Van Owen.
Thank you.
Good morning, Your Honor. My name is Brenny Melander, and I am Taylor Perkins.
Good morning, Your Honor. My name is MJ Mintz, and I am Avery Becker.
Okay, thank you all. I'm going to have everybody turn their cameras on so we can get everybody sworn in. Team members, please raise your right hands. Team members, do you promise that the presentation you're about to give will faithfully and truthfully conform to the facts and rules of the mock trial competition?
I do.
Yes, Your Honor. I do.
All right, great. Witnesses, please raise your right hands. Do you promise that the testimony you're about to give will faithfully and truthfully conform to your witness statements, that you will not add material facts or opinions that are not contained in the case problem, and that you will follow the rules and procedures of the mock trial competition?
Yes, Your Honor.
Yes, Your Honor.
Thank you. And gallery members, including teacher and attorney coaches, family members, and friends, please raise your right hands. Do you promise to represent yourselves as positive role models and to behave in a manner that exemplifies ethical and professional sportsmanship during and after this mock trial round? And we're going to assume that everybody says yes to that question. And then scoring panelists, please raise your right hands. Do you promise to adjudicate the mock trial competition as fairly and objectively as possible in accordance with the facts, procedures, and rules of the mock trial competition?
I do.
All right, thank you. Okay, any preliminary matters before we proceed to opening statements from either side?
Yes, Your Honor. The prosecution asks that we may reserve time at the end of our closing arguments for a rebuttal statement.
Granted.
We also ask that if there's any internet problems or latency or someone's internet cuts out and they can't hear the end of their testimony, that the time is stopped until they can reconnect and state their sentence again.
Granted.
That's all from us.
Anything else? Okay. Defense?
Your Honor, first, we would also like to request that if at any time you cannot hear or see us based on internet problems, please let us know.
Okay.
Also, we would like to clarify that pursuant to Rule of Competition 7.4, for the purposes of our online competition, exhibits that are displayed on screen will not be shown to the jury unless we specifically request to publish. Exhibits may be shared on screen for purposes of identification prior to admission.
Granted.
Your Honor, for the record, all witnesses will be present for the trial today and may not be sequestered pursuant to Rule of Competition 5.3.1.
Correct.
And finally, Your Honor, we would also like to request that the stipulations and jury instructions be constructively read into the record.
And they have been. Thank you.
The defense is ready to proceed.
Great. All right, let's have opening statements from the prosecution.
All right, before I begin, can everyone see me and hear me okay?
We can. Thank you.
Awesome, thank you. I would get back at Coach Brackman if it was the last thing I do. That's what the defendant promised her mother she would do to the victim, Mackenzie Brackman. You see, Coach Brackman was a beloved high school mock trial coach. He was a local attorney that spent most of his free time teaching high school students the rule of law. Now, while most of his students adored him and appreciated his time, there was one student in particular that gave Coach Brackman a hard time. Avery Becker, the defendant. You see, because the defendant rarely did the work they were supposed to do, they argued Coach Brackman. She was rash, emotional, and frankly, unstable. At practice one day, Coach Brackman was attempting to give the defendant constructive feedback. But of course, the defendant wasn't having it. She stormed out of practice, angry and unhinged. And she went up to Coach Brackman's porch and vandalizing it by writing all over it with permanent marker. Now, of course, when Coach Brackman saw this, he immediately kicked the defendant off the team, causing the defendant to be even angrier. And that's when the defendant told her mother she'd get back at Coach Brackman. It was the last thing she did. So that night she planned to get back at Coach Brackman. The next day she skipped school and made a plan to break into Coach Brackman's home and vandalize his home. And on top of that, she even sent out text messages saying that she wanted to do that. However, there was one problem. When the defendant arrived to the house, the victim was home. A struggle ensued, and the defendant ended up killing the victim rather than getting caught. Because like she said, she would get back at Coach Brackman. It was the last thing she did. Today, you'll hear from 3 prosecution witnesses. You'll first hear from Detective Markowitz, who was the lead detective on this case. And she will tell you how she was able to place the defendant at the scene of the crime and at the time of the murder. Next, you'll hear from Investigator Kuzak, who assisted with the investigation and reconstructed the crime scene. And I anticipate Investigator Kuzak will tell you this was a burglary gone bad and a burglary gone to murder. And you'll hear from Alex Cifuentes, who was a friend of the defendant, and also the person the defendant shared her plans with about vandalizing the victim's home. Pay attention to their testimony and keep in mind 3 things. 1, who had the motive to kill Mackenzie Brackman. 2, who had the means to carry out this murder? And 3, who had the opportunity to commit this crime? And by the end of this trial, we will have proven to you that Avery Becker is the only person who meets these 3 things. Now, as a prosecution, we carry the burden in this case. And that burden is to prove to you each and every element of the crimes charged, beyond a reasonable doubt. And we welcome that burden. At the end of this trial, after you've heard all the evidence, my co-counselor, Ms. Brockler, will come before and will ask that you find the defendant guilty. Guilty of first-degree murder and second-degree burglary. Because the defendant was rash, the defendant was emotional, and above all else, the defendant was vengeful. And like she said, she would get back at Coach Brackman if it was the last thing she did. Thank you.
Thank you, counsel. Team Australia.
Your Honor, before I begin, can you see and hear me clearly?
I can, thank you.
May it please the court?
Kind of.
You can't see the big picture when half the pieces are missing. But today, the prosecution is presenting a half-finished puzzle, and they are asking you to overlook all of the missing pieces. And because of this, a young woman's future is at stake, and a killer may get away. We can't change the past and bring the victim back to life, but we can bring justice to this case today. On March 6th, 2020, mock trial coach Mackenzie Brackman was found dead in his home. He had been stabbed and murdered. We agree with the prosecution about that irrefutable fact, but that is only a half-finished puzzle. The prosecution will try to fill in that puzzle. They will try. But all they have is incoherent and faulty evidence that came from a rushed investigation. But you will hear the truth. You will hear from Taylor Perkins, a close friend of Avery Becker, that the day before the murder, they were at the local fry shack playing games on their phones. Taylor Perkins will tell you that fellow mock trial teammate Alex Cifuentes could have stolen Avery Becker's phone, and that the next day, when Avery realized she was missing her phone, Avery Becker and Taylor Perkins spent the entire day looking for the phone, not breaking into someone's house. Next, you will hear from Professor and Private Investigator Blake Van Owen. She will pick apart the prosecution's half-finished puzzle by going through the specifics of the crime scene, including the stabbing and break-in. She will prove that the prosecution's crime scene reconstruction was inaccurate. Furthermore, Ms. Van Owen will go through in-depth cell tower data that backs up the alibi provided by Avery Becker. And finally, you will hear from Avery Becker herself about her relationship with her coach. Mackenzie Brackman, in a moment of rage and frustration, kicked Avery Becker off the mock trial team. But all Avery wanted to do was reconcile and apologize and get back on the team. All 3 of these witnesses will discuss Blair Rollins. Blair Rollins is another suspect in today's case who is barely looked into by the prosecution. Blair Rollins was not at school on March 6th. Blair Rollins has not been located since the day of the murder, and Blair Rollins has a similar build to that of the figure seen in the Ring video cameras. These witnesses will go through how Blair Rollins could have helped Alex Cifuentes steal Avery Becker's phone and frame her for the murder, but the prosecution has a half-finished puzzle. so they couldn't look down all the alternate routes provided by the evidence. Today, I'm asking you to look for all the discrepancies in the prosecution's case, to look for all of the holes in this puzzle that were filled with incoherent and faulty evidence that came from a rushed investigation. The prosecution's experts are absolutely incompetent. Detective Jordan Markowitz has accepted unverified screenshots of possibly fake text messages and brought them into court today. Meanwhile, CSR Kyle Kuzak lost track of key photos for their investigation. The prosecution has a half-finished puzzle, so they can't make any conclusions to who committed this crime. Today, the prosecution holds the burden of proof. This means that to pass a guilty verdict, you, the jury, cannot hesitate that Avery Becker is guilty of murder. But the prosecution has a half-finished puzzle, so they can't logically make any conclusions to who committed this crime. This means that at the end of the day, you, the jury, must have some reasonable doubt to who committed this crime. And I believe that you won't hesitate to call for the innocence of Avery Becker. It is in your hands to make the just verdict of not guilty. Thank you.
Thank you. Prosecution, call your first witness.
The prosecution calls Detective Markowitz to the stand. Good morning, Detective.
Good morning.
Please introduce yourself to the jury by telling us your name and spell your last name for the court reporter.
Jordan Markowitz, Markowitz.
Before we talk about your investigation and your findings, let's get to know you a little bit better. This may be an obvious question, Detective, but what do you do for a living?
Of course, I'm a police officer with the Denver Police Department.
How long have you been with DPD?
13 years.
And what is your current assignment?
I'm a detective with the homicide unit.
Tell us what your duties are as a detective.
Once a crime has occurred and I get assigned a case, I will respond to the crime scene, oversee the collection of evidence, interview any witnesses on scene, and then turn over all of my findings to a crime scene reconstructionist.
And did you do that in this case?
Yes, I did.
Let's talk about your investigation. Tell us how it started.
On March 6, 2020, a passing motorist called 911 to report seeing a possibly passed out person on the front porch of a residence.
What was the address of that home?
444 South Flower Street in the city and county of Denver, Colorado.
Who responded to that 911 call?
Paramedics initially responded, but determined the person was deceased, so that's when officers were called on scene.
And once police were called, what happened?
Police were called, arrived, secured the scene, and then called me to come and investigate. I arrived shortly thereafter at 2:20 p.m.
Describe what you first saw when you got to the house.
I saw a deceased adult male lying in a pool of blood.
And did you document the scene?
Yes, I took photographs.
Detective, are you familiar with what's been marked as Exhibits 2 and 5?
Yes, I am.
What are Exhibits 2 and 5?
Exhibit 2 is a photo of the victim inside the home, and Exhibit 5 is a photo of a knife we found on scene.
How do you know?
I was there and personally observed these scenes.
Are Exhibits 2 and 5 fair and accurate representations of the victim's body and the knife as you found them?
Yes, they are.
Move to admit Exhibits 2 and 5 into evidence.
Team Australia,
No objection, Your Honor.
so admitted.
Permission to publish to the jury by having my co-counsel share their screen.
Granted.
All right, Detective, I'm showing you Exhibit 2. Describe what we see in this photo.
This is a photo of the victim inside the home. As you can see, the victim's left back shoulder area appears to have a puncture wound.
Did you find anything at the scene that you believe could have been used to cause this injury?
Yes. Well, possibly. We found a large steel chef's knife near the body covered in blood.
I'm now showing you what's been admitted as Exhibit 5. Detective, is this the knife you found?
Yes, it is.
Thank you, Mr. Aragon. Was there anything else about the outside of the house that drew your attention?
Yes, I noticed that the home was equipped with a Ring doorbell as well as several cameras.
Now that we know what you observed on the outside of the home, let's talk about your observations for the inside of the home. Are you familiar with what's been marked as Exhibits 7, 8, 9, and 18?
Yes, I am.
Tell us what each exhibit is.
Exhibit 7 is a photo of a drawer in the kitchen. Exhibit 8 is a photo of a knife block in the kitchen. Exhibit 9 is a photo of the dining area. And Exhibit 18 is a photo of just inside the back sliding glass door.
How do you know?
I was there and personally observed these scenes.
Are these exhibits fair and accurate representations of those items when you saw them?
Yes, they are.
Move to admit Exhibits 7, 8, 9, and 18.
Mr. Winton.
I have no objection.
Okay, so admitted.
Let's start in the kitchen, Detective. What, if anything, did you find there?
I found a partially opened kitchen drawer, which I documented in Exhibit 7.
Permission to publish Exhibits 7, 8, 9, and 18 to the jury by having my co-counsel share their screen.
Granted.
I'm showing you Exhibit 7.
Right. This is a photo of the partially open kitchen drawer that I mentioned before. As you can see, it contains several knives.
Okay, now let's look at Exhibit 8.
This is a photo of a knife block we found in the kitchen. As you can see, there's an empty slot indicating a missing knife.
I'm now pulling up Exhibit 9.
Right. So this is a photo of the dining area, and as you can see, there's a knocked over chair on the left and a broken plate on the floor.
Was there anything else that stood out to you around the house, if anything?
Yes, I noticed what appeared to be scuff marks on the inside of the back sliding glass door. I documented that in Exhibit 18.
I'm now showing the jury Exhibit 18. Thank you, Mr. Aragon. Okay, I want to turn back now to the victim. Were you able to determine who he was?
Yes, it was a man by the name of Mackenzie Brackman.
Did the identification of the victim help you further your investigation at all?
Yes. Once we knew the victim's name, we were able to recover the logins to the victim's Ring accounts. That's when we were able to access videos captured on March 6th.
Are you familiar with what's been marked as Exhibits 10 and 12?
Yes, I am.
What are Exhibits 10 and 12?
They are videos from the Ring cameras.
How do you know?
I recovered these myself.
Are Exhibits 10 and 12 in the same or similar condition as when you first collected them from that ring?
Yes, they are.
Move to admit Exhibits 10 and 12.
Mr. Winton.
Yes, I would, excuse me, I would object more prejudicial than probative, as the prejudicial effect of this evidence is substantially outweighed by any probative value. The fact that the intruder is wearing a disguise adds to this not being relevant as well. It's not in dispute whether or not there was a break-in of Mr. Brackman's home, but rather whether or not it was Miss Becker who broke in. This does not go to prove nor disprove whether or not it was Miss Becker, therefore it is irrelevant.
Thank you, Ms. Brockler. Any response?
Your Honor, part of this case and one of these charges is second-degree burglary. These are video footage of the intruder breaking into the home and how exactly they accomplished that. It's also very important that the jury get to see these videos, because part of the reason that Miss Becker is tied to this case is because she matches the build and body shape of the person in these videos. So I think the probative value of these definitely outweigh any unfair prejudice that there could be.
Thank you. I'm going to allow the admission of Exhibits 10 and 12.
Permission to publish to the jury by having my co-counsel share their screen.
Granted.
Detective, I'm playing Exhibit 10. Can you walk us through what's happening here?
Absolutely. So here we see the intruder kind of looking around, and now they're approaching the door. They're trying the doorknob unsuccessfully. And now they're going to go around to the side of the house, where we'll see in Exhibit 12.
All right, let's look at Exhibit 12 now.
Right, so the intruder has already gone through the side gate, and now in this video, we see that they're approaching the back door and entering the home illegally.
Thank you, Mr. Aragon. In addition to the Ring cameras, was there anything else that you learned from the victim?
Yes, we found a number of text and email messages related to something called mock trial.
Why was that useful?
With a little digging, we were able to find out that Mackenzie Brackman was a coach for Colorado High School's mock trial team. With this information, we reached out to the school and got the contact information for all of the students on the team.
And what did you do with that information?
We reached out to several students.
Who was the first student you reached out to?
Alex Cifuentes.
After your interview with Ms. Cifuentes, what did you do next in your investigation?
I got a court order to obtain the phone account records for Avery Becker.
Why?
because Alex Cifuentes told me in our interview that Miss Becker had texted Miss Cifuentes with a plan to break in and trash the victim's home.
And why is that relevant?
It established a motive for Avery Becker to break into the victim's home.
Now, who is Avery Becker?
Avery Becker was a high schooler on the victim's mock trial team.
And through the course of your investigation, did you ever view a photograph of Avery Becker?
Yes, I did.
At this time, Judge, I ask that everyone in the virtual courtroom turn on their cameras so that this witness may make an identification.
Granted.
Detective, can you identify Avery Becker by describing what they look like and a piece of clothing they're wearing?
Absolutely. Miss Becker has a ponytail in her hair, and she is wearing a white shirt with a black blazer.
May the record reflect that the witness has identified the defendant subject to cross.
The record will reflect.
How were Avery Becker's cell phone records important to your investigation?
They corroborated what Alex Cifuentes told me and established or informed me of Avery Becker's location at the time of the murder.
Before we talk about what you uncovered with Avery Becker's records, let's first understand your area of expertise when it comes to cell phone records. Do you have experience working with cell phone records in a criminal investigation?
Yes, I do.
What type of training do you have in the field of cell phone data and analysis?
In addition to regular training that we receive at the Police Academy, I have specialized training in cell phone data and analysis.
Tell us about that specialized training.
I have a cell phone technology and forensics recovery certification from the American Academy of Law Enforcement.
And what did you have to do in order to get certified?
I had to complete a 3-day training course and pass a certification test.
What did that training course entail?
We learned about the types of cell phone data, records that can be obtained, how to use software such as the Celebrite system, and how to both acquire and interpret cell tower data and cell phone records.
And the training you received during that course, do you use that training as a homicide detective?
Yes, I use that training constantly as a detective, and I've downloaded the contents of literally hundreds of phones.
Do you also use and analyze cell tower data on a regular basis?
Yes, I do, and I have in over 50 cases.
And did you do that in this case as well?
Yes, I did.
Did you come to any conclusions based on the data you received?
Yes, I did.
And the methods you used on coming to your conclusions, are those regularly accepted and relied upon in the scientific community?
Yes, they are.
At this time, we move to tender Detective Markowitz as an expert in the field of historic cell site analysis and interpretation.
Mr. Winton.
I am unclear as to the qualifications for historic cell site data, so I would object to that as they have laid no foundation for the historic part of that. However, I would not object to cell phone data and forensic data recovery.
Ms. Brockler, do you want to just lay a little foundation on what you mean by historic?
I think the terminology is what's getting confusing here, Your Honor. Historic cell site data or historic data just means that data that happened in the past. And as we've laid the foundation that this is cell phone data that Detective Markowitz is recovering, that's where the word historic comes from.
Okay, I'm going to allow the qualification of Detective Markowitz in the historic cell site data analysis. Is that right, Ms. Brockler?
And interpretation, yes, Your Honor.
And interpretation, okay. Thank you for that.
All right, Detective, let's talk about what records you obtained in this case and what you learned from them. What are CDRs?
CDRs are a record of all the interactions a cell phone has made. They can also inform you of the location of a cell phone.
And how does it show you the location?
In general, a cell phone will connect to the nearest cell tower. With this information, we can recover where the cell phone's location was at a specific time.
And what did you learn from Avery Becker's cell phone records?
Avery Becker's cell phone records told me Avery Becker's location at the time of the murder.
What was that location?
Avery Becker was at the scene of the crime at the time of the murder.
Thank you. No further questions.
Cross-examination.
Yes, Your Honor, allow me one moment while I adjust my camera. Good morning, Detective. You
Good
came
morning.
to many conclusions in this case.
Sorry, I can't really hear you. Could you maybe like change your mic setup? I'm so sorry.
You give me just one moment.
Or let me try. Okay.
Can you hear me better now?
Yes, sorry. Yeah, thank you.
Good morning, Detective.
Good morning.
You just talked all about the conclusions that you came to in this case. Let's
Yes.
talk about some of the evidence behind those conclusions. There was no DNA evidence found.
No, because the intruder was wearing gloves. They were wearing a full suit that
So
covered
that's
everything.
a no to my question. There was no DNA,
No.
and there were no fingerprints found at the scene of the crime.
Once again, they were wearing gloves. There's no reason to look for fingerprints if they're wearing
So
gloves.
that's a yes to my question. You found no fingerprints at the scene of the crime,
Yes.
and there were no eyewitnesses.
No.
Now, you claim that the ring video is evidence that Miss Becker broke in. Is that correct?
Yes.
However, the suspect in the video is wearing a disguise.
Yes, however, the build is very similar to Avery Becker's build.
So that's a yes to my question. They were wearing a disguise.
Yes.
And Miss Becker was not in possession of such a disguise.
We can't say that for certain.
You didn't even look at her residence for a disguise, did you?
No, I couldn't get the warrant to do so.
A warrant is a court order, is that correct?
Yes, I was able to obtain the court order for her cell phone account records, but breaking and entering into her home to find that
So that's
evidence.
a yes to my question.
Yes, we couldn't get a warrant.
Now, the video does not have a timestamp, does it?
No.
So you don't know exactly what time the video was taken.
Well, the evidence shows that the murder happened between 1:05 and 1:17 p.m.
I'm sorry, you must have misunderstood my question. My question was, you don't know what time the video took place.
Objection, Your Honor. Can we please let this witness answer?
Yes, I'm going to direct Mr. Witten to allow the witness to answer the question fully. Why don't you repeat that question and then allow Detective Markowitz to answer the question?
Detective, yes or no, you don't know what time the video took place.
Not the exact time, but once again, the evidence shows that the murder happened between 1:05 and 1:17 p.m. because that's when a call and text to Avery Becker's phone went.
Objection, non-responsive. I have asked a properly framed yes or no question, and as this is a timed question, as this is a timed competition, if the witness would like to use her own time to clarify and add more context to my question, she may do so on her own time during redirect. However, she is going far outside the scope of my question.
I think you asked the question, counsel. She's allowed to answer the question. You can, certainly try to keep her to yes or no within your question.
Let's talk about your investigation. You claim that the biggest break in your case was talking to Alex Cifuentes.
Yes.
However, you interviewed Avery Becker and Taylor Perkins before you interviewed Alex Cifuentes. Is that correct?
Yes, I did.
Now, you were sent screenshots that you claim were sent by Ms. Becker. Is that correct?
Yes.
However, you waited a full 3 months after the crime took place to ask to be sent these screenshots.
Correct. However, I was comfortable with the screenshots that were sent since so much evidence was piling up against Avery Becker already, and it's an acceptable and often received form of evidence.
You didn't even ask Alex Cifuentes to bring the phone in to be analyzed.
No, because once again, it's an acceptable and often received form of evidence, and a lot of other evidence was already pointing to Avery Becker as well.
Now, let's talk about Blair Rollins. You claim that Blair Rollins was a suspect in this case?
Briefly, yes.
But you never attempted to find Mr. Rollins?
No, because Avery Becker is the only lead in this case.
You never searched his residence?
No.
And you never spoke to her father about where she could be?
No.
Now, let's talk about Miss Becker's phone. You claim that Miss Becker's phone was at Mr. Brackman's home?
It was.
And because of this, this means that Miss Becker was at Mr. Brackman's home?
Yes.
However, CDR data cannot determine whether or not a person had their phone on them,
This is correct, yeah.
and you can't even pinpoint a location. Is that correct?
You can, especially based in urban areas. There's so many cell towers that are located in reasonable places and located very frequently.
I'm sorry, detective. That was not my question. My question was yes or no. You cannot pinpoint an
Objection, Your
exact
Honor.
location.
Again, this witness was explaining her answer to the question. Can we let her do that?
Your Honor, may I respond?
Yes.
Hey, I was simply directing the witness back to my question as she was going outside the scope of my question, and I was simply making sure she fully understood my question and was directing her back to it.
All right, let's move on.
All CDR shows is whether or not a phone interacted with the tower. Is this correct?
Yes, at specific times.
Now, you even claim that Miss Becker's phone was called several times by Miss Perkins with no answer.
Yes, it was.
Meaning Miss Perkins, excuse me, could have been trying to find Miss Becker's phone.
No, I believe it's because Miss Becker was murdering Mr. Brackman at that time.
You're saying it is not even in the realm of possibility that Miss Perkins was attempting to find Miss Becker's phone.
We can say with a degree of scientific certainty that no, Miss Becker was in fact murdering Mr. Brackman. However, there is a slight probability.
Now, let's talk about Miss Becker's alibi. You did not investigate Miss Becker's alibi, did you?
Miss Becker doesn't have an alibi. She's the murderer.
It's your statement today in court that Miss Becker has no alibi.
According to my investigation, she really doesn't have an alibi. I mean, she might say that she does, but we can't trust that for sure.
So she did say that she had an alibi.
She said that. She claimed that, yes.
And you did not even investigate this alibi, did you?
No, because so much evidence was pointing against Avery Becker in this case.
Thank you, Your Honor. No further questions.
Any redirect?
Briefly, Your Honor. Detective, how do we know where Avery Becker was at the time of the murder?
According to her CDRs, the evidence shows that between 1:05 and 1:17 p.m., because Avery Becker got a call and text during that time, it went unanswered and pinged to the cell tower right near Mr. Brackman's home.
Thank you. No further questions.
All right, thank you, Detective Markowitz. You may step down. Prosecution's next witness.
Your Honor, the prosecution calls Alex Fuentes to the stand.
Your Honor, before we proceed, the attorney that is supposed to be cross-examining Detective Markowitz, Alex Fuentes, is having some technical issues. I request that we pause so that he may be on the meeting.
That's fine. Just if you could let us know when he's present, that would be great.
Absolutely.
And counsel for France for the prosecution, I can't see your name. If you could tell me what your name is,
My name is Grant Rose, Your Honor.
Rose? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Your Honor, the crossing attorney is now on the meeting and is simply getting his camera set up.
Great.
All right, Your Honor, may I proceed?
I think we're ready. The attorney for Australia, what is your last name?
Clausen, Your Honor.
Okay, thank you. All right, go ahead, counsel.
Good morning, Mr. Fuentes.
Good morning.
Let's start off with something easy. Tell us your name and spell your last name for the court reporter.
My name is Alex Cifuentes, Sifuentes.
Mr. Fuentes, how old are you?
I'm 17 years old.
Are you in school?
Yeah, I go to Colorado High School and I'm a senior.
What are some things you like to do at school?
I enjoy hanging out with my friends and I'm also on the mock trial team.
Were you on the high school mock trial team last year?
Yes, I was.
Tell us who your mock trial coach was.
Mackenzie Brackman.
What was Coach Brackman like?
He was just a really caring coach, and he was always helping his students. I really enjoyed working with him.
And did you have any friends on the team last year?
Yeah, I would say I was pretty good friends with Avery Becker.
What was that friendship like?
Well, I guess Avery and I really only spent time together at like mock trial or other related events, but I mean, we got along well and we really pushed each other to be better students.
You mentioned spending time together at mock trial practice. Did you also have the ability to observe how Avery Becker and Coach Brackman interacted?
Yes.
Describe that for us.
Well, Avery rarely came prepared for practice, and I guess Coach Brackman was just always getting on Avery's back about being more prepared.
Did they appear to get along?
No, they always seemed frustrated with each other.
Give us a time when Avery was unprepared.
At the regionals tournament, it was pretty clear that Avery was unprepared for court, but she still managed to win a Best Attorney award. But after the tournament at practice, Coach Brackman was really laying on to Avery because of how unprepared she was.
How did Avery appear to react?
Avery looked so angry. You could just tell she was really infuriated because she stormed out of practice that day.
And what happened when she left practice?
I saw Avery grab a Sharpie permanent marker on her way out of the classroom, and then she went to the parking lot.
And how did you know that it was a Sharpie permanent marker?
I could just tell by the way it looked. It's very distinct. I mean, the Sharpies in that classroom don't look like anything else, like any other markers or like dry erase markers.
And what happened in the parking lot?
Avery ended up vandalizing Coach Brackman's car by writing Worst Attorney Award and permanent marker on the car.
Did Coach Brackman know that Avery did that?
Yes, he caught her.
Ms. Fuentes, I want to talk now about what happened after the car vandalism incident. Did Avery Becker ever reach out to you after being kicked off the team?
Yeah, she texted me.
How did you know it was her texting you?
I have her number saved in my phone, and she also said, "Hey, it's Avery."
And did you save a copy of this text conversation, Ms. Fuentes?
Yes, I did.
And did you also provide that to Detective Markowitz in this case?
Yes, I emailed her a screenshot of the conversation.
Are you familiar with what's been marked as Exhibit 14?
Yes, I have a copy in front of me.
Perfect. What is Exhibit 14?
It is a screenshot of the text conversation between me and Avery.
How do you know?
I recognize how her name is saved in my phone, and this is also what we said to each other.
Is Exhibit 14 in the same text conversation you had with Avery that day?
Yes, it is.
Your Honor, the prosecution moves to admit Exhibit 14 into evidence.
Mr. Clausen.
Your Honor, I have multiple objections. May I be heard?
Yes.
My first objection is pursuant to 801 hearsay. Both the contact name and the text themselves are being offered for the truth of the matter asserted, which is one, that Avery Becker wrote these messages, and two, Avery Becker had planned on breaking into Mr. Brackman's home. Pursuant to Rule 1002, because of the fact that these are screenshots, these can't be the best evidence, as the messages were also written before the murder, meaning that these screenshots can't be the best evidence pursuant to Rule 1003 because they don't come directly from the phone.
Is that it? All right,
Yes,
thank you. Thank you. Mr. Rose, any response?
Yes, Your Honor. In response to hearsay, this is not hearsay. This is an admission by a party opponent. We have shown by a preponderance of evidence that these statements are attributed to the defendant. This witness has a relationship with the defendant and communicates via text messages often with them, and has identified these text messages as coming from the defendant, as the texter identifies himself by saying it's Avery. And then to that best evidence objection, Your Honor, in this case, we are only able to have those screenshots of this text conversation. The original copy should be provided unless it is not available, and in this case, it is not. The only way that we could have these original text messages would be if the cell phone is brought in, and that cell phone has been therefore lost and therefore cannot be provided. And under that rule, the next best evidence is the screenshots, and they are allowed to be entered.
Thank you, counsel. I'm going to overrule the objection and allow the admission of Exhibit 14. Proceed.
What did Avery Becker text you?
Avery texted me and asked me to talk to Coach Brackman on her behalf and convince him to let her back on the team.
Did you agree to do that for her?
Yeah, I told her I would try, but I also let her know that I really doubted anything was going to change Coach Brackman's mind.
How did Avery respond to that?
Avery texted me saying, well, if he's still upset about his car, then he's going to be really upset when he sees what I do to his house.
How did you respond?
I texted back, what are you going to do to his house?
And what did Avery Becker tell you?
She said, I'm going to wait till he's at work, then break in and trash it. That'll show him.
At this time, Judge, the people request permission for my co-counsel to publish Exhibit 14 to the jury by sharing their screen.
Granted.
Thank you, Mr. Aragon. And thank you, Your Honor. I have no further questions for this witness at this time.
All right, thank you, Mr. Rose. Cross-examination.
Yes, Your Honor, if I may request just one moment to replace my camera.
Certainly.
Now, Your Honor, before I begin, can you see and hear me all right?
I can, thank you.
Thank you. And if any time that changes, please let me know and we will get the issue sorted out shortly.
Thank you, counsel.
Good morning, Ms. Fuentes.
Good morning.
Now, from what you saw, Ms. Becker never really had to put a lot of effort into mock trial, did she?
No, she didn't.
But you always put in your best work, didn't you?
Yes, I did. I took mock trial very seriously.
And her lack of preparation irritated you, didn't it?
Yeah, it irritated the whole team.
And you had a lot of respect for Mr. Brackman, is that correct?
Yes, I did. He was a very talented attorney.
And you proved your respect through your dedication to mock trial, is that right?
Yes.
And you believe that Ms. Becker never gave Mr. Brackman enough respect, correct?
That's correct.
When Ms. Becker got a Best Attorney Award, it felt like a slap in the face. Is that right?
Yes, because I worked a lot harder than she did, but she still won that award, and she was also an amazing attorney.
And she had always gotten the awards that you believed others or even you deserved.
Yes, I did believe I deserved them, but she did as well.
And you were excited for the larger roles that you could have with her off the team, weren't you?
Yes, but she was graduating soon anyway, so it wasn't a huge deal.
Now, you claim Miss Becker knew exactly what she was doing when she picked up that marker and visualized hard, is that correct?
Yes.
And you claim that Mr. Brackman rightfully demoted Miss Becker to the B team for the vandalization, is that correct?
Yes.
And you believe that Mr. Brackman should have pressed criminal charges against Avery for the vandalization?
Yes, because Avery committed a crime.
Now, earlier on, you told the jury that Miss Becker reached out to you about getting back on the mock trial team, is that right?
Yes.
Your Honor, let the record reflect that my trial technician is displaying Exhibit 14, which has been previously admitted into evidence.
Mr. Clausen, I'm having a hard time hearing you at the end of your statements, so I didn't quite hear what you said about Exhibit 14. Can you repeat it?
Your Honor, let the record reflect that my trial technician is displaying Exhibit 14, which has been previously admitted into evidence.
Thank you. The record will reflect.
Now, you claim that Miss Becker became enraged when she realized that she wasn't going to be let back on the team, is that right?
Yes, she was very angry.
And you no longer have the phone that you received these messages on, do you?
No, my battery was really old, so I ended up getting a new phone.
And during the time that these were sent, you never thought about taking a screenshot of the contact information?
I didn't think I needed to. I mean, that's Avery's contact. It always has been.
And you never gave your phone to Detective Markowitz, did you?
No, that was my mistake. Like I said, the charger or the battery was bad, so I accidentally just left it charging right before I left, but that was my mistake.
In fact, you sent in these screenshots 3 months after the murder occurred. Is that correct?
Yes.
Thank you, Your Honor. No further questions. And Mr. Hernandez, you may now take down the exhibit.
Thank you. Any redirect?
Yes, Your Honor, briefly. Ms. Fuentes, were you friends with Ms. Becker?
Yes.
Then why would you turn in these screenshots if you were friends with her?
I mean, we were friends, but if Avery is going to commit a crime, I'm not going to protect her for that. And I honestly did not think that when she sent these screenshots, I didn't think anything was going to come from it. I mean, she's just a teenager. And then after Mr. Brackman died, I was devastated, and I really didn't see this coming.
Thank you. No further questions, Your Honor.
All right, thank you. Ms. Fuentes, you may step down. Prosecution, call your next witness.
Yes, Your Honor. The prosecution calls Kyle Kuzak to the stand.
Thank you. Before we move on, Team Australia, I'm having a little bit of a problem hearing you when you queue up and step away for your cross-examinations. So if I think I'll allow it this next time, but it's really a little bit distracting. So I just want to make sure that you guys are properly heard. And so we may not do that if that's all right with you. I don't want to mess up your whole plan, but it's becoming hard to hear, and I want to make sure you're heard. All right, go ahead and proceed.
Thank you. Good morning, Investigator Kuzak.
Good morning.
Please introduce yourself to the jury, starting off by telling your first and last name, and spell your last name for the court reporter.
My name is Kyle Kuzak. Kuzak is spelled K-U-Z-A-K.
Now, before we get into the details of your investigation, let's get to know you a little better. What do you do for a living?
I'm a crime scene reconstructionist, or CSR as we are called.
What is a crime scene reconstruction investigator?
A crime scene reconstruction investigator is called onto a case once all the evidence has been collected. We then sort through this evidence and ultimately come to an opinion based on the facts of the case, scientific reasoning, and our training and expertise.
How does someone become a CSR?
To be recognized as a CSR in Colorado, you must be certified by the Colorado Bureau of Investigation.
And are you yourself certified by the Bureau?
Yes, I am.
How did you obtain your certification?
I went through extensive training in the field of crime scene reconstruction as well as investigation.
Where do you work as a CSR?
I work for the Denver Police Department.
How long have you been a CSR?
For the past 19 years.
And how long have you been doing that with DBD?
The last 3.
What types of crimes have you investigated?
I'm usually called in on complex crime scenes such as home invasions, armed robberies, homicides, and other property crimes.
And are you the CSR in the murder investigation of Mackenzie Brackman?
Yes.
Now, as the CSR in this case, did you form certain opinions about how this crime was committed?
Yes, I did.
What did you rely upon for these opinions?
I relied upon the police reports and the exhibits, as well as I visited the crime scene after it was processed. I visited with the crime lab and I reviewed the autopsy report.
Now, the training you used to form your opinions, is this a type of training regularly accepted by the scientific community?
Yes.
And have you reliably applied those principles and methods to the facts of this case?
I did, yes.
Your Honor, at this time, the people move to tender Investigator Kuzak as an expert in the field of crime scene reconstruction, pursuant to Colorado Rule of Evidence 702.
Mr. Seitel.
There's no objections.
Okay. And then Professor Kuzak will be admitted or qualified as an expert in crime scene reconstruction. Proceed, counsel.
Thank you. Investigator Kuzak, before we get into your opinions on this case, let's talk about the evidence you relied on for those opinions. What evidence was significant in your investigation?
I focused on 3 main areas of evidence, first being the ring videos, second being the photographs, and third being the autopsy report.
All right, let's break each one of those down and talk about each one of those. Starting off with the ring videos, what did you learn from the ring videos?
From the ring videos, you can see that the intruder approaches the residence on the afternoon hours of March 6, 2020. They try to enter through the front door, however, learn that it's locked and enter through the back sliding glass door.
Were you able to make any determinations about who the suspect was based on the ring videos?
From the videos alone, no. However, they match the general height and build of the defendant.
In addition to the mask, was anything else hindering their identification?
Yes, the suspect was wearing gloves.
Turning now to the photographs of the scene, talk us through what you learned from them.
Well, one of the first photographs I looked at was scuff marks just out inside the back door, as you can see in Exhibit 18.
My co-counsel is showing you what has already been admitted as Exhibit 18. What did that indicate to you?
This indicated to me that a struggle occurred by the back door.
Thank you, Mr. DeRose. In addition to the scuff marks, what other evidence was significant to you in that area of the house?
Well, in the dining area, there was a knocked over chair and a broken plate.
Why was that significant?
This was significant seeing as the dining area was just 5 feet away from the back door, indicating that the struggle at the back door moved towards the dining area, which was just outside the kitchen.
You mentioned the kitchen. What evidence did you find there?
There was a knife block missing a chef knife, as you can see in Exhibit 8.
Why was that significant?
This was significant seeing as there was a chef's knife found by the victim's body and there was a missing chef's knife from the knife block, indicating to me that the murder weapon came from this knife block.
Describe the chef's knife that was found near the body.
It's an all-metal knife with measuring about 12 inches in length. The blade measures about 7.5 inches and is approximately 2 inches across at its widest point.
In addition to the knife block, what other evidence did you find in the kitchen?
There were blood droplets that began in the dining area and led towards the front door.
Why was that significant?
It indicated to me that the victim was stabbed in the dining area, however, ended up near the front door.
Earlier, you mentioned an autopsy report. What did you learn from that report that you relied upon in your investigation?
The medical examiner determined that the cause of death was penetrating trauma to the thoracic aorta.
What did that report tell you?
Basically, that the victim was only stabbed once, however, this injury turned to be fatal.
Did the medical examiner determine why this one injury was fatal?
Yes. Essentially, when the knife was inserted into the victim, it obstructed and slowed any internal bleeding. So once that knife was removed, the victim would have lost a significant amount of blood, leading quickly to death.
Did you have the knife found at the scene tested for DNA and fingerprints?
Yes, I did. However, the only DNA that came back was that of the victims, which wasn't that surprising.
Why is that not surprising?
Well, as I mentioned before, the suspect was wearing gloves, so there was no possible way that their DNA could have gotten on the crime scene.
Given all of that, what is your opinion on how this crime occurred?
The physical evidence leads me to only one conclusion, and that is that the victim was alerted via the ring security system that the intruder was approaching their home. They then looked for a defensive weapon and confronted the intruder once they entered through the back sliding glass door. A struggle occurred over the knife in which the intruder gained possession of the knife and stabbed the victim in the upper back shoulder area. The victim then removed the knife and bled to death.
How did you reach that conclusion?
Well, it's obvious that the knife came from the kitchen, seen as there was a knife block missing the chef's knife. There was an open knife drawer, not to mention there was a knocked over chair, a broken plate, and scuff marks, which all indicate a struggle.
Why does it matter who introduced the knife in the struggle?
As it is clear that the intruder did not bring the knife into the situation, it shows that they entered the home with more of the intention of committing a burglary or a property crime, more so than committing a murder.
Objection, Your Honor. May be heard.
Please, grounds.
This is speculation outside of the scope of the witness's expertise, as Ms. Kuzak is trying to testify to what the intruder was trying to do. Meanwhile, her grounds of expertise are crime scene reconstruction, not inside the head of the intruder. So she would not be able to know what the intruder's intention was.
I understand the objection. Prosecution, any response?
Yes, Your Honor. What Investigator Kuzak is using is she's describing the evidence and how that came to her conclusion. So my question, I asked her about the knife and how the knife specifically caused her to come to that conclusion, not the motives of the victim or anything like that, just specifically the evidence itself.
All right, I actually agree. I'm going to sustain the objection. I think that the opinion went a little farther than that in this particular instance.
Your Honor, may that part of testimony be stricken from the record?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
And one last question, Ms. Kuzak, just for clarification, what is your conclusion of how this crime occurred?
My conclusion is that the intruder entered the home unlawfully, and the victim was able to gain a knife in their defense. From there, the intruder then was surprised and took the knife and stabbed the victim. The victim then removed the knife and bled to death.
Thank you. No further questions, Your Honor.
Thank you. Cross-examination.
Yes, Your Honor. Before I begin, do you prefer that I sit down for this, or may I stand up?
I think stay seated. It's hard hearing, and I want to make sure you're heard.
Yes, Your Honor. Good morning, Ms. Kuzak.
Good morning.
Let's start with the beginning of the crime. You testify that Mr. Brackman was aware of the intruder
Yes.
and that he was alerted by a Ring camera system placed around the house.
Yes.
Yet we don't know if Mr. Brackman saw a Ring camera push notification, correct?
That's correct, but Ring security system is designed to alert its owners.
But we don't know if Mr. Brackman even saw a notification.
That's correct, but we do know that a notification was sent.
And no one in the prosecution was able to see on Mr. Brackman's phone any push notifications.
I don't believe so.
Yet a push notification for this Ring system could have provided us with a timestamp for the video, correct?
I don't really know. I mean, my role in this situation is to put together the evidence and come to a conclusion on what happened. Would this evidence have been useful? I don't really exactly know.
Moving on, you testify that once Mr. Brackman was alerted by the Ring cameras, he grabbed a knife from the knife block or knife drawer,
Yes, correct.
and that the intruder gained this knife from Mr. Brackman in a struggle.
Yes.
But you barely have any clear evidence to this struggle.
Well, there was the scuff marks by the back door indicating a struggle. There was also the knocked over chair and the broken plate, not to mention the missing knife in the knife block and a drawer showing that the victim was looking for a knife.
Let's start with the scuff marks that you mentioned. You were not able to date exactly when these scuff marks were made.
Not exactly, but we can safely say they were made on the day of the crime, seeing as there were no other scuff marks in the house.
But you never found any physical evidence tying these scuff marks to the crime itself.
Not exactly.
Moving on, Your Honor, at this time I request that my trial technician display Exhibit 17 for the purposes of identification.
Granted.
Ms. Kuzak, this is your witness information tracking sheet, correct?
Yes.
And you testified earlier today that it is a general part of your process in crime scene reconstruction to create witness tracking sheets like these,
Yes.
and that this is not an abnormal thing to do for your investigation.
That's correct.
And you had knowledge, Ms. Kuzak, of the information in this witness tracking sheet,
Yes, I made it.
and that we could trust the information in this record.
Yes.
Is this exhibit fair and accurate to the best of your knowledge?
Yes.
Your Honor, at this time I move to admit Exhibit 17 into evidence.
Prosecution, any objection?
Yes, Your Honor. I'm objecting to hearsay.
Response, Your Honor?
Yes, please.
I have just laid proper foundation pursuant to Rule 8036 that this is a proper business record, which is an exception to the hearsay rule.
Your Honor,
Thank you, counsel. Oh, sure.
Your Honor, yes, this is a public record or a business record. However, this record contains direct contact from Detective Markowitz, making this become a police report. And as we know in criminal trials, police reports do not count as a public record or a police record, or a business record, excuse me. Therefore, it's not admissible.
Response, Your Honor?
Yes, go ahead.
I've just laid the foundation that Ms. Kuzak is in fact the custodian of this record, and pursuant to 8036, there are 5 grounds that need to be checked for an exhibit to be admitted under this rule. and I have met those 5 grounds previously by laying foundation.
And I tend to agree. I'm going to allow it.
Excuse me. Your Honor, may I publish to the jury?
You may.
Ms. Kuzak, you mentioned 3 suspects in this exhibit, correct?
Yes.
These suspects are Avery Becker, Blair Rollins, and Alex Cifuentes.
Yes, that's just how I labeled them in my report.
Let's start with one of these suspects, Alex Cifuentes. We both just heard Cifuentes testify a few moments ago, correct?
Correct.
But Alex Cifuentes has been noted as a suspect by you, correct?
Yes, I mean, I believe everyone is a suspect until proven otherwise. However, Avery Becker is the only suspect that had a lead.
But Alex Cifuentes is the only lay witness for the prosecution, correct?
I believe so, yes.
And Alex Cifuentes is one of the 3 specific suspects that you noted in this document, correct?
Yes, once again, that's just how I labeled them.
Let's move on to another suspect in this document, Blair Rollins. Do you know the current whereabouts of Blair Rollins?
No, I do not.
Do you know of anyone in the police force who knows where Blair Rollins currently is?
No, I don't believe anyone knows.
Do you know where Blair Rollins was the day of March 6th?
No.
And Blair Rollins wasn't at school on March 6th, correct?
I was not aware. I'm just hearing this now.
Moving on, you found some blood splatter at the crime scene, correct?
Yes.
This blood splatter was around the house in specific areas that you noted.
Yes.
And you took some photographs of this blood splatter to examine, correct?
The investigators did. I simply looked at the photographs.
But you still made conclusions and used these photographs during your investigation, correct?
Yes.
But you don't have these photographs today.
No, they were lost due to a technical error, corruption, and they were lost after my review, yes.
So you were the only one who was able to see these photographs?
No, the crime lab and the investigators were also able to see the photographs before they were corrupted, I mean.
But the defense expert will not be able to see these photographs.
Not today. I mean, I'm not sure if they've reviewed it, but not today.
And the jury will not be able to see these photographs.
Sadly not. Sorry for the corruption.
Thank you, Ms. Kuzak. No further questions at this time.
Thank you, counsel. Any redirect?
Yes, Your Honor. Just a brief redirect. So Investigator Kuzak, we heard talk about your procedure when it came to labeling suspects. How exactly, or how do you label suspects in your report?
I looked through the police report and I put that in my flow chart. They didn't exactly label them as a suspect, but I label everyone in the case as a suspect. So that's just how I went about labeling.
Now, if they're labeled as a suspect, does that mean they committed the crime?
No, in fact, 2 of the suspects had no leads.
And finally, one last question. Why didn't the police look into Blair Rollins?
Blair Rollins was a dead end. There was no lead there.
Thank you. No further questions, Your Honor.
Thank you. Investigator Cusack, you can step down. Any further witnesses from the prosecution?
No, Your Honor. The prosecution rests.
Thank you, counsel. Defense, call your first witness.
Your Honor, the defense calls Taylor Perkins to the stand.
Thank you, Ms. Perkins.
And Your Honor, before I begin, I would like to ask you, because of the interruptions with my sound, would you like me to stay seated for this direct examination?
I would, and Mr. Clausen, I'm really having a hard time with hearing you at times, so just really speak clearly if you can, as much as
Yes, Your Honor.
as much as that's not your fault. However, we can fix
Yes, Your
it.
Honor. Good morning. Please introduce yourself to the jury.
Good morning. My name is Taylor Perkins, and I am best friends with Avery Becker.
And how do you know Miss Becker?
I was on the mock trial team with Avery all 4 years of high school.
And how was your experience on the mock trial team overall?
Well, the experience was good at some points, but it wasn't the best if Coach Bracken didn't like you.
And how do you think that Miss Becker did on her performance throughout mock trial?
Avery did incredible. She was the best we had on the team. But despite all of her efforts and everything, she was demoted to the B team.
And why was she demoted to the B team?
Well, a month before the regional tournament, Avery had showed up to practice the most unprepared I have ever seen her. And her performance was honestly still flawless, like always. But Bracken was really upset with her, and she was demoted.
And what did you think about the demotion?
Avery was the best we had on the team. She deserved to be on A team. I mean, come on, it was her senior year. She deserved where she was. She deserved to be where she was.
And did you and Miss Becker still hang out after you?
Of course, she was still my best friend.
And did anything happen around the time of Mr. Bracken's murder?
Yes, the day prior, Avery had lost her phone at the Fry Shack.
What had happened that day?
Well, Avery had tried going to practice, but was told to leave. So we had come to my house and we were there for a while. Then we had gone to the Fry Shack and we were hanging there for a while. And then the mock trial team had showed up.
And going back just a little bit, why was Miss Becker trying to, why was Miss Becker going to practice if she was already kicked off the team?
Well, Avery was kicked off the team due to riding on coach's car, which she feels horrible about.
And what had happened after you got to the Fry Shack?
Well, Avery's departure was brought up at some point, and we got into a huge discussion about it. And at one point, Alex had joined the conversation, causing Avery to get super upset, and she had to go to the bathroom to calm down. That was the last point I had seen Avery's phone with her.
And you mentioned Miss Fuentes. Did you two ever communicate in or out of mock trial?
We wouldn't talk if it wasn't necessary.
Well, would you say that you know Miss Fuentes?
I wouldn't say we're extremely close, but yes, I do know her.
So during your time at the Fry Shack, is it at all possible that Miss Fuentes stole Miss Becker's phone that evening?
I mean, it could be possible. All I know is that it seemingly disappeared after Avery went to the bathroom.
Let me stop you. Mr.
What
Clausen,
happened?
Mr. Clausen, I'm sorry to interrupt. Can you repeat that last question? I just want to make sure. Is everybody else having a hard time hearing as well, or is it just me?
I am, Your Honor.
Okay. All right. Yeah, just, I know that might be distracting and I apologize, but I just might have you repeat if I'm not able to figure out what your question is.
Oh, of course, it's no problem, Your Honor. My question was, is it at all possible that Miss Fuentes stole Miss Becker's phone that evening?
Objection, Your Honor.
May I proceed, Your Honor?
What's the objection?
The objection is speculation.
Okay. And Mr. Clausen, any response?
Yes, Your Honor. Pursuant to Rule 701, Ms. Perkins is simply testifying based off of her observations and perceptions. And because of the fact that this is simply a hypothetical question, it can't really fall under speculation.
All right, overruled. Proceed.
And what had happened the day after?
The day after, Avery picked me up at my house. We had a carpooling plan, so she picked me up that morning. I had tried texting her to see if we were riding together, but she didn't respond. So when she came to the house, I asked her why she didn't respond. And that's when I had realized her phone was missing. That's when we went out to go look for Avery's phone.
And did you skip school that day?
Of course, it's not going to be anything important that day, and we had first period off, so it was completely fine.
Now, because of this, where did you search?
We had gone to the mall and everywhere we had been the day previous, and I was calling and texting Avery's phone every single chance I had to see if we could hear a sound, but we never did. And then I remembered that Avery's phone was last seen at the Fry Shack, so we had headed that direction.
And did you ever find the phone?
No, we did not, sadly.
Do you know of anyone who had tension with Mr. Brackman?
Yes, Blair Rowlands. I didn't even know Blair that well, and I knew she had tension with Brackman.
And Miss Perkins, to the best of your knowledge, did Avery Becker kill Mackenzie Brackman that day?
She couldn't have. We were together all day looking for her phone. It's not like she had the time to slip away and murder someone.
Thank you, Your Honor. No further questions.
Cross-examination, Mr. DeRose.
Yes, Your Honor. Good morning, Ms. Perkins.
Good morning.
I'd like to start off by talking about your relationship with Avery Becker. You and Avery Becker are friends?
Yes, actually best friends.
Right, best friends. And you both run the mock trial team?
Yes, all 4 years of high school.
And Avery often butted heads with Coach Brackman?
Yeah, but they had their disagreements at times like everyone else does.
Right. I mean, he was always giving her a hard time about something.
Well, of course, but Avery was the best we had on the team. You have to give your best players a hard time sometimes.
Right. And this eventually led to Coach Brackman demoting Avery down to the B team.
Sadly, yes.
But things didn't really get better between Avery Becker and Coach Brackman.
Sadly, it did not. They had more arguments as she was demoted.
Right. In fact, they got worse. Let's talk about the day that Avery Becker vandalized Coach Brackman's car. During practice, Coach Brackman was being pretty mean to Avery,
From what I heard from Avery, he was.
telling her that she didn't deserve mock trial awards that she had won at the tournament.
Yes, that is correct.
And this upset Avery.
Of course. Avery loved mock trial and she worked hard for those awards.
Right. So Avery wrote on Coach Brackman's car with a marker,
She did.
and Coach Brackman found out.
Yes, he was very furious at Avery.
Right. And kicked Avery off the team.
Yes, he did.
Avery didn't think it was fair she got kicked off.
Of course not. She had put in all 4 years of high school just dedicated to mock trial.
Right. Avery just liked to play some pranks on the coach.
Of course, she thought it was an expo marker.
Right. And she just wanted to let off some steam.
Yeah, even she knew it was a reckless choice after she did it.
Right. And Coach Brackman freaked out.
I mean, yeah, he didn't know what it was.
Right. But her plan with the car that day backfired.
It did, yes.
However, Avery was desperate to get back on the team.
Well, yes, it was her favorite activity. She wanted to get back on.
Right. She texted everyone on the team to help her,
Yes, she did.
even texting Alex Fuentes.
Avery had informed me she was going to, but I don't know if she ever did.
Right. You didn't know what Avery had planned to get back on the mock trial team.
Not exactly, no, but I knew she wanted on.
Right. And you knew that she could be rash.
She had her moments, yes, like everyone does.
Right. Speaking of rash, let's talk about the days leading up to the murder. The day before Coach Brackman was murdered, you were with Avery Becker.
Yes, I was.
You went to the Fry Shack that day.
Yes, we did.
You ran into some mock trial people,
Yes, we did.
and Avery got upset.
Well, of course, Alex was being kind of insincere.
Right. And she stormed off.
I mean, she needed to cool down. It's better than yelling at him in front of everybody.
Right. I agree. And the next day, March 6th, Avery picked you up from your house that morning.
Yes, she did.
And it's your position that you spent the whole day searching for Avery Becker's phone.
Yes, you burned the entire day looking for Avery's phone.
Right. And you maintain that you were nowhere near Coach Brackman's house that morning.
Yeah, we were at the mall the entire day looking for her phone.
Because you know where Coach Brackman lives?
No, me and Avery have no idea where he lives.
Thank you. No further questions, Your Honor.
Thank you. Any redirect?
May I inquire as to a brief time check, Your Honor?
Certainly.
The defense has 20 minutes and 36 seconds remaining.
Thank you. Briefly, Your Honor.
Proceed.
Miss Perkins, you were best friends with Avery Becker, but during your time being with her, did she ever make any rash decisions?
Everyone makes rash decisions, sorry.
And do you really think that someone like your best friend would do something as rash as murder?
No, of course not. Avery is rash, but she's not rash enough to commit murder.
Thank you, Your Honor. No further questions.
Thank you. Ms. Perkins, you may step down. Does the defense have more witnesses?
Yes, Your Honor, the defense calls Professor Blake Van Owen to the stand.
Okay. Professor Van Owen, thank you. Proceed.
Good morning. Can you please state your name for the jury?
Good morning. My name is Professor Blake Van Owen.
And as a professor, what do you teach?
I teach police practices and social justice at CU Denver.
Do you have any professional experience with police practices and social justice?
I do. I was a police officer for the Aurora PD. I also took a master's degree in criminal justice, and I've been teaching for many years.
Can you please elaborate on your jobs professionally with police practices and social justice?
Of course, I spent some time as a school resource officer, and I'm also a private investigator.
And have you ever testified as an expert witness before?
I've testified in over 100 cases in many different fields.
Can you please describe some of those fields that you've testified in?
Of course I can. I've testified in police procedure, investigation tactics, the use of force, cell tower data, crime scene reconstruction, and forensic data analysis.
Your Honor, at this time, I move to tender Blake Van Owen as an expert in general police practices, which includes forensic evidence techniques, crime scene reconstruction, and cell tower analysis.
Ms. Brockler,
Permission to voir dire.
granted.
Good morning, Professor Van Owen.
Good morning.
I want to start by talking about your experience, and I want to go through some of the things that we've already talked about, so bear with me. I just want to make sure we get this right. You joined the Aurora Police Department.
I did.
Where you worked for a total of 9 months, is it?
Yes, that's correct.
And does that include the months you spent in the police academy?
No, it does not.
Fair to say, though, you were never assigned as a lead investigator on a homicide.
No, I was not a detective.
Or on a burglary.
No.
Or frankly, in any case.
No.
You never filed a case as a detective?
No, I did not.
Or, unlike Detective Markowitz, testified as an expert when you were a police officer?
No.
You never completed any other advanced training through the police department?
No, I left the police department.
So when it comes to police procedure and tactics, your entire foundation is based solely on your 9 months as a rookie cop.
No, it's not.
Judge, the prosecution objects to this witness being accepted as an expert in the field of general investigation. I think it was forensic science, cell phone data, and crime scene reconstruction, as well as police tactics. Speaking on police procedure and tactics, this witness has zero training in police tactics or procedure other than just the basic police academy. And we certainly don't let every police officer testify as an expert just for completing the police academy. Just because this witness teaches a class at a local school on police procedure does not mean that they are an expert in the field, or frankly, that they have any knowledge on the subject at all. When it comes to crime scene investigation and reconstruction, this witness is not a certified crime scene reconstructionist, and they have no training in that field from the Colorado Bureau of Investigation. They have not worked as a CSR for any police department, and we have not heard about any training in that field at all. When it comes to cell phone data and analysis, this witness has not told us about any training or expertise in that field, any certifications that they have in that field. We don't know how they handle cell phone data. We don't know how they collect it, and we do not know any of their expertise, education, or training in that field.
Ms. Brockler, any argument from Team Australia?
May I consult with my co-counsel?
Certainly. Anything to add, Mr. Seitel?
Yes, Your Honor. Pursuant to Rule 702, first of all, Ms. Van Owen has previously testified in court to these areas of expertise many times before. Also, she does have training and experience pursuant to 702, not only as a police officer, but also as a private investigator and a professor.
Thank you. And you're moving to qualify Professor Van Owen in general police practices, forensic evidence, and crime scene reconstruction, and what was the third?
Cell tower analysis.
All right, I'm going to allow that. Proceed.
Ms. Van Owen, can you please describe what the prosecution claims happened in today's case?
Of course I can. The prosecution claims that Avery Becker broke into Mr. Brackman's house and accidentally killed him after a brief struggle.
Do you believe that this is what occurred?
No, I do not.
Why not?
Well, there are 6 main problems with that. We have the knife block, the scuff marks, how the knife was held, the text messages, the cell tower data, and the lack of other suspects.
Let's start off with your first issue, this knife block. Can you please elaborate on that?
Well, we saw earlier in Exhibit 5 that the knife that killed Mr. Brackman was solid metal. The knife block and the knife drawer in Mr. Brackman's house do not contain any solid metal knives, which means that this knife most likely came from outside of the residence.
Your Honor, at this time I ask that my trial technician display Exhibits 5 and 8, which have previously been admitted into evidence.
Granted.
One moment as the page refreshes.
Ms. Van Owen, is this the knife you were mentioning before?
Yes, that is the knife that killed Mr. Brackman.
And is that the knife block?
Yes, it is.
Can you please describe your conclusion again with these images in front of us?
Of course, as you can clearly see in Exhibit 5, the knife is solid metal. In Exhibit 8, you see the knife block in Mr. Brackman's kitchen, which has knives that are partially metal and partially wood. This knife clearly did not come from this knife block and must have been brought in by the intruder.
Let's move on to your second problem, the scuff marks. Can you please explain what's your problem with these?
Well, Kyle Kuzak found some scuff marks at Mr. Brackman's house that he claims indicate a struggle. Unfortunately, there is no date on these scuff marks, so we don't know when they were made, which means they're unreliable evidence.
Is it possible that they were made at another time or by another action?
Of course, anything's possible.
Let's move on to your third problem. Your Honor, at this time, I move to display Exhibits 3, 4, and 21 for the purposes of identification.
Granted.
Ms. Van Owen, can you please go through these three exhibits and explain what they are?
Of course. Exhibits 3 and 4 are both images of Mr. Brackman's wound, and Exhibit 21 is a photo of my hand holding a knife.
I could see that Exhibit 21 isn't the actual murder weapon, so how is it actually relevant to your investigation?
Exhibit 21 is merely a demonstration of how the knife used to kill Mr. Brackman was most likely held in order to deliver the wound that did kill him.
And are all of these exhibits fair and accurate to the best of your knowledge?
Yes, they are.
Your Honor, at this time, I move to admit Exhibits 3, 4, and 21 into evidence.
Ms. Brockler.
Yes, Your Honor, for Exhibits 3 and 4, I object to lack of foundation and improper expert testimony. Here's why. Those exhibits were both taken by Detective Markowitz, so Ms. Van Owen cannot attest to whether or not they're fair and accurate representations of the crime scene. And while she did rely on these in her report, she cannot talk about these or enter these exhibits under herself.
Okay, and Exhibit 21?
Exhibit 21, I do not object to.
Okay. And any response to the objection?
Your Honor, in Exhibits 3 and 4, we can clearly see that these are the stab wounds, and Detective Markowitz during the prosecution never said that these images were in fact false or inaccurate. So it is perfectly plausible for Ms. Van Owen to base expert conclusions on these exhibits and for us to admit them into evidence here.
I'm going to allow Exhibits 3 and 4 and 21 to be admitted at this time.
Ms. Van Owen, can you please explain your conclusions based on the stab wound?
Of course. As you can very clearly see in Exhibits 3 and 4, the wound given to Mr. Brackman lies laterally across his body. This means that it would be almost impossible to give that wound during a struggle, especially in a bear hug type motion like Mr. Kuzak claims. This would be much more feasible had the victim been surprised from behind.
And how does Exhibit 21 tie into the stab wound?
Exhibit 21 is a demonstration of how the knife most likely would have been held to achieve that type of lateral wound from behind. It would give the wielder enough force to puncture through the ribs and into the top of the heart in order to deliver the same wound that Mr. Brackman died from.
And does the size of the intruder and the victim matter to your reconstruction?
Yes, it does. In order to achieve that type of wound from a struggle, the intruder would have to have been much larger than Mr. Brackman, but as we saw in the Ring doorbell videos, the intruder was not very large.
Thank you, Ms. Cusack. Thank you, Mr. Hernandez. You could take down these exhibits. Oh, I apologize. I called you Ms. Cusack. Of course, your name's Ms. Van Owen. Ms. Van Owen, let's go into your fourth problem, the text messages.
Well, I take issue with the text messages simply because they're screenshots. The police have a very convenient technology called Celebrate, which they use to download the contents of phones. And they did this in the case of Mr. Brackman's phone, but they did not choose to do that for Alex Cifuentes' phone. They merely accepted unverified screenshots, which makes them pretty easily doctored and also very unreliable.
And have you found any evidence that these screenshots were doctored or that Alex Cifuentes could have had the motive to doctor them?
Physically, they don't show any signs.
Compound question and speculation.
Your Honor, may I rephrase my questions?
Sure. Let me sustain the objection first and go ahead and rephrase.
Yes, Your Honor. Ms. Van Owen, did you find any evidence to these screenshots being doctored?
Well, seeing as the phone that sent the Avery Becker's side of the text messages was missing, it's very likely that they could have been doctored. Additionally, it could have just been sent from a stolen phone.
And is there any evidence that Alex Cifuentes doctored these text messages?
Physically, no.
Physically, no?
No.
Is there any evidence suggesting that Alex Cifuentes took the phone at the fry shack?
Well, seeing as the phone did go missing that night, it is quite likely that it was either stolen or lost.
Let's move on to your fifth problem, the cell towers. Detective Markowitz mentioned some cell towers in their direct examination. Do you believe that this is an accurate representation, an accurate way to pinpoint where Avery Becker was?
No, it's absolutely not accurate.
Why not?
Well, the cell towers themselves cannot pinpoint a person. They only show the general geographic location of where a phone is. Additionally, phones can connect with cell towers that are 7 to 8 miles away.
So are you saying that the cell phone could have been 7 to 8 miles away from Mr. Brackman's house?
Objection.
Yes.
I'm sorry, what was the objection? I didn't hear it. The grounds. Are you saying leading? You're cutting out.
Yeah.
Okay, okay. Want to make sure it's right. Any response?
I phrased it as, are you suggesting this? And I was waiting for an explanation to this question. I was not saying you are suggesting this, which that basic phrasing makes it not a leading question.
Overruled. Continue,
May I re-ask my question?
please.
Ms. Van Owen, are you suggesting that this cell phone could have been 7 to 8 miles away from Mr. Brackman's house?
Yes, it could have. In the diagrams shown by Detective Markowitz, the 3 cell towers cover a total range of 38 square miles, which the cell phone could have been anywhere in.
Thank you. And let's move on to your sixth problem, the lack of other suspects in this case. Please elaborate on that.
Well, we heard initially that Blair Rollins was dismissed as a suspect, but I find that strange, seeing as they have a much stronger motive to attempt murder.
Can you please elaborate on this motive?
Comparatively, losing a parent due to a defense lawyer's inability to defend is much stronger of a motive than
Your Honor, lack of foundation.
Objection, lack of foundation. Is that what you said? Mr. Seitel.
May I ask my opposing counsel to what statement lacks foundation out of that sentence?
Yeah, the conclusion about losing a parent and the knowledge of Blair Rollins in this whole situation, there hasn't been foundation laid for how this witness knows that or where she heard that from.
Any response, counsel?
With Your Honor, I could lay foundation to how this witness knows about Blair Rollins' past.
All right, sustained.
Ms. Van Owen, can you please describe your knowledge of Blair Rollins and his family?
Well, when I was doing my own investigation, I looked into Mr. Brackman's ex-clients, one of which was Jonathan Rollins. Their child, Blair Rollins, went to school with Avery Becker and Alex Cifuentes, as well as Taylor Perkins. They were missing on the day that Mr. Brackman was murdered, and seeing as their father went to jail due to Mr. Brackman's inability to defend them, they have a much stronger motive than Avery Becker.
Can you please describe the supposed motive of Avery Becker?
Avery Becker's motive is supposedly just getting kicked off the team.
And do you know where Blair Rollins currently is, Ms. Van Owen?
No, Blair Rollins has vanished off the face of the planet.
And do you know if the prosecution has at all tried to find Blair Rollins?
They have not.
Thank you, Ms. Van Owen. No further questions at this time.
Thank you, counsel. Cross-examination.
Yes, Your Honor. Professor Van Owens, you just testified to a whole bunch of opinions, but before we get to your findings in today's case, it's important to look at why you are here today. You were hired by Avery Becker, correct?
I was hired by the defense, yes.
To offer opinions on behalf of the defense.
I was hired to do an investigation.
And you were paid quite well for your opinions.
I am paid by the defense, yes.
And for your testimony today.
Yes.
In fact, you're on the clock right now.
I am.
Let's talk about your rates. You make $225 an hour for your research.
I do.
And you get paid even more than that to testify to your opinions in trial.
I do.
So let's talk about those opinions that Ms. Becker paid so much for. First, you would agree that it's important to consider all of the evidence found at the scene.
It is.
And not place any emphasis on one piece of evidence over all the others.
I tried to weigh everything equally.
So that's a yes, Professor?
Yes, it is.
The most basic principle of being an investigator is to never make assumptions, never assume.
Mm-hmm.
Is that a yes?
It is.
Now, you believe that the intruder brought their own knife because they went to the victim's home with the intention of killing the victim.
Yes.
You assume this because the knife that was used to stab the victim is a different brand than the knives in the knife block.
I don't assume it. That is my conclusion.
Even though the most basic principle of investigation is to never assume.
It's not an assumption. It's a conclusion based on evidence.
But let's talk about what the evidence tells us from the scene. I'm showing you what's already been admitted as Exhibit 10. Or I will be momentarily when my co-counsel pulls it up. Beautiful. Now I'm showing you what's already been admitted as Exhibit 10. You would agree, Professor, that this intruder does not have a knife in their hands.
They do not know.
You could assume that it's somewhere else on their body.
It could possibly be.
And how many inches was that knife in total length?
I believe it's somewhere around 10 to 12.
Professor, if both Detective Markowitz and Detective Kuzak's reports indicate that the knife is 12 inches, you would agree with that?
Yes, I do.
Okay, so that's this big. I'm using my hands to indicate 12 inches. You would agree with that?
I would.
So you think that the intruder was carrying a knife this big somewhere on their person?
It could possibly happen, yes.
But even if the knife was somehow magically in a gigantic pocket, of course there would have been DNA found on the knife, and you would agree that didn't happen here, correct?
Not necessarily.
You would agree that DNA was not found on the knife, correct?
DNA from the intruder was not. They were wearing gloves.
Thank you, Mr. Aragon. Let's talk about some other things that didn't happen in this investigation. Part of your opinion is, in this case, is listing all of the things that Detective Markowitz could have done but failed to do.
I would say so, yes.
You believe this investigation was rushed.
It was.
That it had the hallmarks of, I made up my mind at the get-go, and then I found the evidence that supports my conclusion.
It did.
For example, you believe that Detective Markowitz should have pulled the cell tower data for Taylor Perkins' phone.
I believe he should have, yes.
Because that would show us where Taylor Perkins was the day of the murder.
It would show the general geographic location as well as the matching texts and calls to Avery Becker.
So that's a yes, Professor?
Yes, it would.
You also believe that Detective Markowitz should have pulled the cell phone records for Avery Becker's phone for the day before the murder.
I do.
To confirm where Avery Becker's phone was the day before.
Yes.
But isn't it your opinion that cell phone records are unreliable?
They're not completely accurate, but seeing as the phone was potentially lost on March 5th, it could have shown where the phone had been lost.
So the cell phone evidence is only reliable when it supports your conclusion, Professor.
No, it's not.
But even still, you believe that you uncovered another person with an even stronger motive to kill Mr. Brackman,
I would say that.
a man by the name of Blair Rollins.
Yes,
Because Mr. Rollins' father was convicted of murder, and Mackenzie Brackman was the attorney who represented the father at trial.
that is true.
He wanted revenge against Mackenzie Brackman,
Potentially, yes.
and you believe that he had ample opportunity to commit this crime
I do.
because he was a student at Colorado High School.
Yes,
He was friends with Alex Cifuentes.
yes,
He matches the build and body shape of the suspect in the ring videos.
he does.
And he was absent from school on the day of the murder.
He was.
But Professor Van Owen, isn't it also true that Avery Becker was also a student at Colorado High School?
It is true.
And Avery Becker was also friends with Alex Cifuentes.
I don't believe that's the case.
And Avery Becker also matches the build and body shape of the suspect in the ring videos.
That is true.
And Avery Becker was also absent from school on the day of the murder.
Avery Becker has an alibi in which they were looking for their phone.
But Professor, she was absent from school on the day of the murder, correct?
Absent and looking for their phone.
So that's a yes.
Yes, they were absent.
And Professor Van Owen, isn't it true that Avery Becker wanted revenge against Mackenzie Brackman?
I wouldn't say to the degree of murder, but potentially.
But it's true that she wanted revenge.
Potentially.
You reviewed Avery Becker's statement before testifying today, correct?
I did.
And you would agree that Avery Becker told her mother, "I would get back at him if it was the last thing I did."
That is what she said.
Thank you. No further questions.
Any redirect?
Yes, Your Honor. Before I begin, may I inquire a brief time check?
Sure.
Of course, the defense has 9 minutes and 37 seconds remaining.
I will give a brief redirect, Your Honor.
Thank you.
Ms. Van Owen, have you ever seen a jacket with large pockets before?
Yes, I have.
Would you describe these pockets as magical?
No, I would not.
And do you base your conclusions off evidence or do you base it off assumptions?
My conclusions are solely based on the evidence.
Thank you, Ms. Van Owen. No further questions.
Thank you, Professor Van Owen. Any further witnesses from the defense?
Your Honor, the defense would call Ms. Avery Becker to the stand. Your Honor, due to the issues that I was having earlier, would you prefer that I do my direct examination sitting down?
I would. Thank you for asking. And you know what,
Morning.
before you proceed, I never got the name of prosecution witness that's conducting the cross-examination from France.
Oh, me?
Yeah.
Sorry.
Sorry.
My name is Jacob Aragon.
Okay, perfect. I thought that, but I didn't want to just call you the wrong name.
Mhm.
All right, proceed, counsel. Thank you.
Good morning. Could you please introduce yourself to the jury?
Hello, my name is Avery Becker.
Why are you here today, Ms. Becker?
I'm here today because I'm being accused of murdering my mock trial coach.
Did you commit this crime?
No, of course not.
Now, we'll get more into that in a second. Could you explain to the jury a little bit about your experience in the mock trial program?
Yes. Last year, I was a high school student at Colorado High School. Throughout my time competing, I realized that I was pretty good at mock trial and I didn't have to try as hard as others.
What did Mr. Brackman think of this assumption?
Mr. Brackman, he hated my work ethic. He made it abundantly clear that he thought I was lazy. And he hated when I diverted from my scripts and yeah.
Did this ever boil over into any incident?
Once in a while we would get into some fights at practice.
Now, what would you describe your relationship with Mr. Brackman?
My relationship with him was very tense, to say the least.
Now, could you tell the jury a little bit about the car incident that Ms. Cifuentes mentioned earlier?
Yes. One practice after regionals, we were going over what we did well and what we could work on. I thought that maybe Brackman would congratulate me on my Best Attorney Award and Best Closing Award, but he didn't. Instead, he got on my case about not sticking to my script.
How did this make you feel?
I was crushed. I got so mad, I stormed out of practice. When I got outside, I saw his prized possession, his Porsche. On it, I wrote worst attorney award, unfortunately.
Did you know this was a permanent marker when you did this?
No, not at all. I thought I was holding a dry erase marker.
Now, what happened after you vandalized Mr. Brackman's car?
Afterwards, Brackman got outside and he saw what I did to his car and he just flew up at me. He was so mad. It was one of the worst things I've ever done, though.
Did you ever make an attempt to apologize for this incident?
Yes, of course I did. The next day, I went down to his office to see if I could apologize. He was not willing to hear me, and so because of this, I had to text him to see if I could get on the team and to tell him how sorry I was.
Did you ever text Alex Fuentes about getting back on the team?
No, of course not.
Were you even friends with Alex Fuentes?
No, Cifuentes and I did not have a relationship as friendships.
Your Honor, at this time, I ask that my trial technician display what has previously been marked as Exhibit 14.
Granted.
Ms. Becker, are these your texts?
No, I've never seen these text messages in my life. I don't know who sent these. These aren't mine.
Thank you, Mr. Hernandez. You can take the screenshots down. Now, Ms. Becker, where was your phone on March 6th, the day of the incident?
On March 6th, I really don't know. I misplaced it.
So what were you doing on that day?
Taylor and I decided to go to the mall and the Fry Shack, which is where we were the day prior. We figured that maybe my phone would still be there. I really wanted to try to find it, but unfortunately we couldn't.
So were you at Mr. Brackman's home?
No, I don't know where Brackman lives.
And did you kill Mr. Brackman?
Of course not. Brackman and I did not have the best of relationships, and I'm not going to try to say that we did, but I would never kill him. I am not a killer.
Thank you, Your Honor. No further questions at this time.
Thank you. Cross-examination.
Yes, Your Honor. Good morning, Ms. Becker.
Good morning.
Let's start by talking about the difficult relationship you had with Coach Brackman. You two didn't get along very well.
Unfortunately, no.
You'd argue at almost every practice.
Yes, it was not fun.
You felt that Coach Brackman would unfairly accuse you.
I don't understand your question. Can you please rephrase or re-ask it?
Yes, you felt that at practice, Coach Brackman would unfairly accuse you.
I still don't understand your question. I'm sorry.
All right, then I'll move on. He told you that you didn't put in the work.
He thought that I didn't, yes.
He would call you lazy.
He did, unfortunately.
Ultimately accuse you of things.
He would accuse me of being lazy or just being lucky.
So that's a yes?
Yes.
Get mad at you for not paying attention.
Yes, he would do that.
And you felt that he never gave you the credit for what you did.
He never did. He was always on my case about my work ethic.
Right, and he also demoted you down to the B team.
Yes, because of one of our big fights.
Which was a team you felt was full of losers. Was that the word that you used?
I did use that word, but in my opinion, I just thought that I should be on A team because I was very good at mock trial.
So that's a yes, you did use those words?
I have used those words, yes.
And this was upsetting to you.
It was very upsetting, yes.
You tried everything to convince Coach Brackman to put you back on the A team.
I wanted to be on A team so bad.
But this wasn't even the worst of your relationship.
I'm sorry, I don't understand your question.
Well, I'm referring to after regionals. Your relationship reached a boiling point, correct?
Yes, it did.
Right, let's talk about what happened. You performed very well at regionals.
I thought I did. I got a couple awards.
Right, you got the Best Attorney Award.
Yes.
But you did it by going against Coach Brackman's advice.
I thought I knew what I had to do to get the award and win. And so that's what I did.
Right, you didn't follow his scripts.
No, I didn't want to.
And this didn't sit well with Coach Brackman.
He did not like when I diverted from my scripts, and I really liked when I would ad lib or add some things.
Right, and because of that, he told you you didn't deserve the Best Attorney Award.
Yes, that is what he said.
And that made you really angry.
Yes, I got very mad because of this and was a
Right.
little too.
I'm sorry. You called him the worst coach in the state.
It felt like he was being a little cruel, so yes,
And then you stormed out of practice.
I did.
Saw Coach Brackman's Porsche
When I got outside, yes.
and wrote in giant letters across the hood, Worst Attorney Award.
Yes, I did do that, but it was one of the worst things I've ever done in my life.
Right, Coach Brackman was livid because of it.
Yes, he was very mad.
He yelled at you, I've had enough.
He did yell at me.
And that made you mad.
I was a bit heated in the moment of what was happening.
So that's a yes, it made you mad?
Yes,
You went home and you talked to your mom.
I did.
Told her that you're kicked off the team for no good reason.
I didn't tell her what exactly happened, unfortunately, and I should have.
Right, you didn't tell her what you have done to his car.
No, I didn't.
And not only did you fail to tell her the truth, but you swore to your mother that you'd get back at Coach Brackman if it was the last thing you did.
I did say that to my mom, but I was not thinking of what I was saying in the heat of the moment because I was very angry that I got kicked off the team. But it was one of the worst things I've ever done.
That's a yes. You told your mother you'd get back at Coach Brackman if it was the last thing you did.
Yes, I did say that.
Thank you. No further questions, Your Honor.
Thank you. Any redirect?
Briefly, Your Honor. Ms. Becker, could you tell us about your emotional state when you got home?
When I got home after practice,
Yes.
when I got home, I was so mad. I couldn't believe that I was just kicked off the team. I was very angry.
Were you thinking clearly?
No, I wasn't.
And did you get back at Mr. Brackman?
No, I tried to apologize to him instead.
Thank you, Your Honor. No further questions.
Anything further, Mr. Aragon?
No, Your Honor.
All right. Thank you, Ms. Becker. You may step down. Any more defense witnesses?
No, Your Honor. The defense rests.
All right, let's have closing arguments. Prosecution.
I would get back at him if it was the last thing I did. That's what Avery Becker promised her mother she would do to Mackenzie Brackman. And on March 6th, 2020, Avery Becker fulfilled her promise. We brought forth two very important charges in today's case: second-degree burglary and first-degree murder. So let's talk about those charges, because I'm going to ask you to go back and deliberate on those in just a minute here. Let's talk about the burden of proof that we've met in today's case and proving each one of the elements of those charges. Let's talk about second-degree burglary. Avery Becker, on March 6, 2020, broke into Mackenzie Brackman's home on 444 South Flower Street with the intent of criminal mischief. She wanted to go in and trash it and break into the place. That is what she told Alex Cifuentes she was going to do, and by golly, she did it. Let's talk about that charge of first-degree murder. Now, this is unique in this case because usually with a murder charge, we talk about intent and the perpetrator's intent to kill. To find Avery Becker guilty of first-degree murder, she did not have to intend to kill Mackenzie Brackman. It just happened during the course of that second-degree burglary. She did not have to intend for it to happen, but Mackenzie Brackman ended up dead. Let's go through the facts of this case. Let's talk about the whole picture of this case. You heard from Detective Markowitz, who's the lead investigator in this case, that Avery Becker is the only lead in this case. While they did look at other suspects and look into those other suspects, Avery Becker was the only one with a motive and with her location at 444 South Flower Street at the time of the murder. You heard it from Detective Markowitz. Avery Becker was at the scene of the crime at the time of the murder. That's irrefutable. Avery Becker wanted revenge against Coach Brackman. She told that to Alex Cifuentes. Even if you don't believe Alex Cifuentes' texts, even if you believe that Alex Cifuentes forged those, we know that Avery Becker still wanted revenge against Mackenzie Brackman because she told her mother that's exactly what she would do. Avery Becker matches the build and body shape of the suspect in the ring videos. Avery Becker took the day off at school so that she could drive down to Mackenzie Brackman's house so that she could break in. She thought that he wouldn't be home. She was surprised to find him home. She broke in. He met her with a knife. They grappled over this knife, and she ultimately won control of that knife and stabbed him. That's the full picture. All of the facts in this case point to Avery Becker beyond a reasonable doubt. Avery Becker wanted revenge against Mackenzie Brackman. She told her mom that that's exactly what she was going to do. And on March 6, 2020, she sought out that revenge.
Thank you, Ms. Brockler. For the defense.
Your Honor, before I proceed, can you hear and see me clearly?
I can, thank you.
May it please the court.
Proceed.
You can't see the big picture when half the pieces are missing. The prosecution has presented you with a half-solved puzzle and asked you to overlook all the missing facts in their case. You, however, cannot overlook all of the missing pieces because the prosecution had the burden of proof in today's case. They had to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that Miss Becker committed murder in the first degree and second-degree burglary of a dwelling. We'll start with the second count. The second count states that Miss Becker unlawfully entered and remained in Mr. Brackman's home. The first count states that while Miss Becker was in Mr. Brackman's home, Mr. Brackman died. They needed to prove both counts beyond a reasonable doubt. What is reasonable doubt? Reasonable doubt is such a doubt that would cause reasonable people to hesitate in matters of importance to them. A mere hesitation is all that is required for you to return the verdict of not guilty. After hearing all the missing pieces in the prosecution's case, you must have much, much more than a mere hesitation. Let's break down some of the missing pieces in the prosecution's case. Let's start with their failed investigation. You heard their lead detective, Jordan Markowitz, tell you that they knew Miss Becker had an alibi, but she chose not to investigate. You also heard them tell you there was no DNA, no fingerprints, and no eyewitnesses. So what did their investigation find? A cell phone and a video. Let's break this evidence down. You heard Detective Markowitz tell you that Miss Becker's phone interacted with a tower near Mr. Brackman's home. She also told you that this cannot pinpoint a location within this area. Then you heard Professor Van Owen tell you that this area covers an area of nearly 38 square miles. Now, as for the video, all the video showed was a disguised intruder enter Mr. Brackman's home. Miss Becker was not in possession of such a disguise, and Detective Markowitz didn't even bother looking at Miss Becker's home. Now, let's move on to Kyle Cusack and their interpretation of this evidence. You heard them say that they lost crucial evidence without ever letting a defense expert look at this evidence. They then used this evidence, which you, the jury, will not even be able to examine, to base many of their conclusions on. This was yet another missing piece in the prosecution's puzzle. Now, you also heard Professor Van Owen today. She told you what the evidence actually shows. Professor Van Owen explained to you that there is very little evidence of a struggle. And she also told you that because Detective Markowitz never thoroughly searched Mr. Brackman's home or Mr. Brackman's phone, we don't know if he had notifications on. The prosecution presented you with a half-finished puzzle and asked you to deliver the verdict of guilty. They asked you to overlook all the missing pieces in their case. They asked you to overlook the lost evidence, the lack of them looking into an alibi, and the lack of investigation into other suspects. You, the jury, have the power to give the only just verdict, the verdict of not guilty. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Winton. Any rebuttal from the prosecution?
Yes, Your Honor. The defense wants you to believe that Avery Becker had the unluckiest day of her life on March 6, 2020. The defense wants you to believe that Avery Becker lost her phone and someone, maybe Alex Cifuentes or Blair Rollins, stole that phone, went down to 444 South Flower Street, committed a crime with that phone so that they could all place her there. Look, the evidence is mounting against Avery Becker. We have the full picture. I would agree that's pretty inconvenient for Avery Becker to have evidence stacked against her, especially if she wants to be found not guilty. But what we do have is the full picture. The reason that Detective Markowitz didn't look into an alibi for Avery Becker is because we knew where she was at the time of the murder. And guess where that was? The scene of the crime. She was at 444 South Flower Street. You know how we know? Those cell phone records. The same cell phone records that the defense expert wanted us to pull for Taylor Perkins and Avery Becker the day before. The defense expert wanted us to rely upon those records to pinpoint Taylor Perkins for the day before. Yet the defense in the same breath claims that those cell phone records are unreliable. Nope, that's just inconvenient evidence against Avery Becker because we knew where she was. Avery Becker had the motive to commit this crime, and she was the only one with the opportunity to do so. You have to find Avery Becker guilty because she told her mother that she would get back at Coach Brackman if it was the last thing she did. And on March 6, 2020, she did that, and it resulted in Coach Brackman's death. Bring justice to this case and find Avery Becker guilty.
Thank you. Thank you, counsel. Everybody can breathe now. I think we're going to make sure that the scoring judges are done. And when you are done scoring, judges, just turn your cameras on and then we'll do some brief critiques so that you guys can be on your way.
Yes, this is Shauna from the Colorado Bar Association. Just the scorekeepers, if you can use the link that I shared with you earlier in the chat and then submit it. And once I get the all okay, then you can start submitting. Once you let me know that you've submitted, then you can start the Q&A portion.
Okay, is that everybody? We're all done? Great. And are we good to go?
Yeah, I just got confirmation that they have all of your ballots, so feel free to go ahead and start the Q&A.
All right, I will just say, wow, you guys can turn your cameras on too. I am blown away. I cannot believe you guys are in high school. I'm mad at you. I would never have been this good. So yeah, amazing, amazing job. It just naturally really, really good. I mean, if I were a dean at a law school, now I'm going to be really general, but I am so mega impressed. I mean, just with every single one of you, the opens and closes were as good as you know you see in a normal courtroom, and I'm not even lying right now. So just amazing job. The witnesses, okay, wow. Just really, I'm just so shocked. I had chills. Ooh. So good work, you guys, and good luck with everything. And I'll let the judges who really like took you apart talk now.
I can jump in. Hi, everybody. My name is Mike Larchik. I'm a assistant attorney general at the state AG's office. And I just want to echo what our judge just said. It was phenomenal work all around. I mean, it really shows, I mean, just a huge amount of work that went into this by all of you. It was really impressive. Not just, you know, individual components, but you guys all put on a coherent case with themes that track through from the opening and not just again on the closing, but through your witness examinations too. And that's frankly better than a lot of lawyers I interact with. And it's really impressive work. We got feedback before coming here that you guys might be suffering from feedback fatigue. So I won't go through individual comments other than just say it was very impressive all around. And you know, we end up having to score a winner. Sometimes when I do these, it's very clear one team was the winner. This one was not clear to me. I was scoring each element, and however they totaled is how they totaled, because it was a really excellent presentation by both sides. So congratulations to all of you. You did a really fantastic job.
Okay, I'll go next. So I agree with what everybody said so far. You guys are all really outstanding, and it's so clear you deserve to be here. I'm just really impressed. There were quite a few things I saw in this round that really stood out to me that maybe I've not seen in others, and I'm just going to really quickly go through them. Both openings, again, really engaging, dynamic, super easy to follow. And your themes were really clear and so well presented. The France, your direct, Ms. Brochler, you were very natural. Every time you stood up, I was impressed. You really looked like you were a pro and really knew what you were, what the trial was, and was very responsive to what your witnesses were saying. Great transitions. In fact, all of France, you had really good transitions in your direct where you say, and now I'm going to direct your attention to this, or now I'm going to direct your attention to that. Direct is never the flashy part, but it's the most important part, and you guys just did so well. Yeah, again, all good transitions. So on the defense cross, I think it was Mr. Seitel who used the investigation notes. Am I right on that? That was really good. I haven't seen it in the tournament, and it was really impressive. And you did a really good job of making it clear that there were these two other people that should have been looked at harder. Miss Boschler, I'm probably saying that wrong. Your voir dire was excellent. Your voir dire of that witness was so strong and so well done. It really, you guys honestly could be in my next trial. So what
we could be losing. That's the scary part, right?
I know.
We'd be like, what?
Right. I might call them for a few tips.
Okay.
A lot. So Mr. Seitel, you did, between you and your witness with the 6 problems and the going through your first, your second, your third, so persuasive and really beautifully done. France, your closing argument was great. I thought you did a fantastic rebuttal. I thought that was just a perfect, really fluent way to finish your argument. And then Australia, on your closing, you said something that I thought was so good. You highlighted that it was just a mere hesitation that we needed to find him not guilty. And that word, those words together, mere hesitation, you immediately identify with that. We all recognize immediately how powerful just sort of saying, hey, wait a minute. So well done. And then also you said the prosecution is asking you to overlook and overlook and overlook. And I thought, again, those are just really strong points. You guys, your witnesses were so good, really engaging, really credible. I just can't say enough positive things. Good luck, you guys, in the tournament and life.
Hi, everyone. I'm Christina. I'm a law clerk in the 1st Judicial District. I echo everything that everyone else has said. You did a phenomenal job today. I'm very impressed. I was particularly impressed with what seemed to be your solid grasp of objections and how to respond to those and the rules of evidence. I mean, that's a hard thing to learn. And if you do end up going to law school, you'll have whole classes on that. And it takes a long time to really get it. And it seems like all of you got it. So I was particularly impressed with that. Great job, everyone. I'm sure you spent a lot of time on that. I also really enjoyed the pretty easy flow you had with the exhibits, publishing them to the jury. And I mean, it was great teamwork. It definitely seems like you've practiced. You all worked together really well. And I thought you did a fantastic job with that. And then last couple things, I think your professionalism on both sides was solid. You treated each other with respect. You did a great job. I think that you'll be awesome colleagues to each other in the future. And then lastly, congratulations, on all the hard work that you've put in. And I just have to say kudos. It takes a lot of courage to do this, and keep up the good work and keep going forward with this, because you all have a future in this if you want it. Thank you.
Absolutely. Yeah, great work, guys. Congratulations and good luck to you. And I'm going to leave the room and everybody's dismissed.
Thank you all so much.
Thank you so much.
Bye.